YouTube, welcome back. Thanks for checking out another episode. I hope you guys are all having a fantastic day. In today's episode, we're going to take you through day 2, which is really winners round 1 of our Call of Duty Champs 2020 playoff bracket. I'm going to give you my predictions for the 2 matches that we are going to see on Thursday, August 20th in winners round 1. If we're looking at this bracket here, it is the 2 matches in the top left hand corner. So we have the New York Subliners versus the Minnesota ROKKR. We have the London Royal Ravens versus the Toronto Ultras. So again, 2 teams in the top left hand corner. One of those, so either New York or Minnesota, will go on to play the Chicago Huntsmen. The other will drop down into elimination round 2. London or Toronto will move on to play Florida. The other team will move on again down into elimination round 2. Before we get into this one, this is why getting those seeds 5 through 8, so 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th seed, was super important, because if you win, obviously you move on into winners round 2, but if you lose, you are now in a double elimination tournament. So if you lose, you go down to elimination round 2 and you get the chance at making a run through the losers bracket. So without further ado, let's go ahead. Let's get into our very first matchup. We have the New York Subliners versus the Minnesota ROKKR. To start this one off, I do want to take just a little bit of a quick look at how teams have played as a whole throughout the entire year. And then we'll focus a little bit more on what they have done lately, and being more specific, what they have done after the new patch meta. So for me personally, and I explained this in yesterday's video, I don't care too much how you did at the beginning of the year, because at the beginning of the year, for the first 7 or 8 months, we played 4 SMGs, 1 M4, and it was a totally different game. Now that things have been nerfed just a little bit, we're seeing more M4s, we're seeing more assault rifles, the RAM. So things have changed just a little bit. So I'm a little bit more concerned with what have you done after that meta change, since it's basically a different game that we are playing now. But if we go ahead and look at what we have up here in this corner, if we're looking in the top left, we have a 12-16 record overall for the Minnesota ROKKR. Now, I will say that a lot of these wins came at the beginning of the year. When it came down to LAN, before we moved on to the online part of our season, Minnesota was 7-4. So if we take that out of the equation, once it went online, they are only 5-12. So that's something to think about moving into these predictions. When it comes to Hardpoint, they are 25-23. This is their best game mode. When it comes to search, they are 12-24. And I'll get into this in a second, but there are a lot of maps and modes that they are really bad at. There are some that they're good at, but when it comes to ones that they are bad at, they are really bad at them. And then when it comes to Dom, they are 13-15. So for putting this in order, best at Hardpoint, next is Dom, not very good at Search and Destroy. I think they're like the 11th ranked team in Search and Destroy. So if they could get a win in Search, that would be a huge matchup, but it's not something that I would count on. One thing that I do want to point out, and we mentioned this before, when it comes to Gunrunner Hardpoint, they are 1-5. When it comes to Gunrunner Search and Destroy, they are 1-7. So when we looked at some of these teams yesterday, there are maps that some teams just aren't the best at, but when it comes to Minnesota, they seem to have like kryptonite maps, right? That's the first thing, is how they have done throughout the course of the year. Again, one of the things that I'm most concerned with is what have they done for us lately. So if we look at how they have done after the new meta, when it comes to CDL New York, which was the first one that they competed in, they were 0-2. They got beat by New York Subliners. They got beat by the London Royal Ravens. They were out, even though they did take some maps there, right? They were 0-2 match count, but they did win 3 maps. So keep that in mind. They even took London, who was a pretty good team, to that map 5, ended up losing in round 10. And then when it came to CDL Toronto, they were 0-2 match count again. But I just want to make sure that we're stressing this. In that matchup with the Atlanta FaZe, they were 1 rotation away from beating them in Hardpoint, and they were 1 minute away from beating them in Domination. They had map control in Dom. They just ended up giving it up down towards the last minute, as a lot of teams do against Atlanta. And in the matchup against Florida, they took a Hardpoint on Azir Cave off of Florida. So even though they were 0-4 in their last 2 tournaments, didn't get a single CDL point after the new meta, that's something to keep in mind, that they are performing not great, but they're really close, right? At least they were a few weeks ago. As we move on to the team that they're matching up against, up here in the top left-hand corner, we have the New York Subliners. They are 13-17 overall. If we look at the individual map and mode breakdowns, they are 27-23 in Hardpoint, 17-20 in Search, and 13-17 in Domination. So when it comes to this team, they are much more towards the middle of the pack in each and every one of those game modes. Other thing that I'll say is that if you were to just look at how they've performed after they changed their roster up, these are a little bit better. So again, a lot of this takes into consideration what they did at the beginning of the year when Mac wasn't on the team yet. They had a totally different roster. They played a totally different way. So just kind of keep that in mind. Just like when it came to Minnesota, there are some that they are really good at, right? Gunrunner Hardpoint, they are 11-6, but Gunrunner Search and Destroy, they are 0-6. Gunrunner Domination, they are 3-8. So there are some map and modes that they struggle with. There's a couple that they're dominant at. A lot of these are going to come down to what maps end up getting vetoed and what maps do they play. If we look at what they have done post the new patch meta, we can go ahead and bring up this. And at their own home event, this was the first meeting after the patch, and they went 4-1. They won their home event. Now, I will say they might have just been slightly ahead of the curve, right? There are some teams that it just works out really well for them in the new patch, and they play really well up until all the other teams kind of catch up a little bit. At their own home event, they were 4-1. They did end up winning this event with a 14-5 map count. They beat Minnesota, lost to Chicago, beat London, beat Toronto before finally sweeping their way in the finals over the Chicago Huntsmen. Super dominant performance there. They looked really good in that one. When it came to CDL London, they cooled off a little bit. They came out of the gates. They got a victory over LAG before everybody got smoked by Dallas. Dallas didn't lose a single map this entire tournament, so they lost to Dallas there. But the big one here is that they did end up losing to the Paris Legion in that losers bracket final. They didn't even make it to Championship Sunday. So again, we were talking earlier how they might have just been ahead of the meta a tiny bit before all the other teams picked up. And I think that might have been what we saw there. So when it comes down to what have you done for me lately, of course, at their own home event, New York looks a little bit better. But after that, perhaps some other teams have caught up while Minnesota was playing super close to Atlanta's, to the Floridas and stuff like that. So without further ado, we do have to go ahead and make a prediction here. With this is a really tough one. Even though it seems pretty clear cut, New York won an event, Minnesota was 0-4, right? They don't seem like they are that close, but even though that is the case, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move New York on. I just have a little bit more confidence in their roster right now. I have seen how they have performed as of late in some scrims here and forth with Chicago and some other teams. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to move Minnesota down to the losers bracket, which we'll see how they fare when it comes to Saturday. Those matchups will be on Saturday. New York will play Chicago on Friday. Second matchup here is the London Royal Ravens versus the Toronto Ultra. So if we go back to how these two teams have done as of late, when it comes to the London Royal Ravens, they are 12-14 overall. Again, if we go ahead and take a peek at their map win-loss, they are 23-23 in Hardpoint, 18-18 in Search and Destroy, and then 9-17 in Domination. So in Hardpoint and Search and Destroy, they're basically 500. They play some maps really well. Gunrunner Search and Destroy, they play pretty well. Gunrunner Hardpoint, they play pretty well. So all of these maps right here on Gunrunner, when it comes to Dom, they're not the best, but they're usually a pretty good Piccadilly team when it comes to Search and Destroy. They're a good Arklov team when it comes to Search and Destroy. So again, what maps will end up being played? How do the vetoes work out? If we go ahead and look at their as of late, they did play at CDL New York, where they lost to Chicago before beating Minnesota and losing to New York. So this was kind of so not really the most impressive wins here, right? The teams that you would probably consider better than them, Chicago and New York, they lost to, while Minnesota has been super struggling and they beat them as they should have, right? They basically just took care of business in that one. When it came to their home event, they did get a win over Seattle. Again, not super impressive. And they did get a win over Florida. This is one where they clutched up in map 5, round 10, and were able to win this one. So pretty impressive victory then before finally losing to the Paris Legion on Championship Sunday. So overall, pretty good showing there out of London. Basically, They were 2-1 at London. They were 1-2. So they're basically playing 500, right? They were 3-3 in each of their matchups after the new post-patch meta. If we go ahead and take a peek at their opponent, if we're looking at Toronto, they are 11-13 overall throughout the course of the year. They are 20-25 when it comes to hardpoint. They are 17-18 in search and destroy, 12-12 in domination. So these are two teams that are super tight. They are super close. All of the game modes, they are right around 500. But where things might differ just a little bit, if we go ahead and look at what Toronto has done as of late, at CDL New York, they beat Paris. They beat the Atlanta FaZe. Massive win there before finally losing to New York. Again, New York took care of business at their home event, so this really isn't that bad of a loss. If we go down under beneath, this is where things get pretty impressive. At CDL Toronto, they came out, they beat an OGLA team that played pretty well. They beat Chicago. They beat the Dallas Empire, and they beat the Atlanta FaZe. This is a super impressive. This might be the most impressive run that we have seen the entire year. When has a team beat the likes of Chicago, Dallas, and Atlanta all at the same tournament? So I think when you're looking at these two matchups, London hasn't been playing particularly terrible, right? They haven't been playing bad, but the Toronto Ultra might be one of the hottest teams going into the playoffs. And as they say in traditional sports, that's what you want, right? You have to get hot at the right time. And I think that is what Toronto has done. So we're going to go ahead. I think Toronto is going to win this matchup, which is going to put them into a winners round 2 matchup with the Florida Mutineers. That's going to take London down and put them into the elimination bracket round 2. And those are my predictions for today. So down in the comments below, let me know what you think. Do you think New York's going to beat Minnesota? Do you think Minnesota will finally learn a little bit and turn it around and get that victory to match up with Chicago? Do you think Toronto will continue their hot streak? Do you think London will be able to come out and win this one? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for always having my back, checking out my videos. Any comments, put them down below. If you're new around here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I have you covered throughout the entirety of the Call of Duty League Championship Bracket 2020. Make sure you hit that sub button, leave a like. Thank you guys so much. We will see you in tomorrow's upload.